Part 1. The good years, they thought I was the lucky one. But I was just their backup parent. I always start with the good part when people ask about my childhood. Not because it outweighs the bad, far from it, but because those early memories are the only ones untouched by resentment. The only ones where I felt like a kid instead of a caretaker. Back then, I lived with my grandparents, Gramps and Nana, in their creaky but clean little house with the sunflower garden out front. I was 6 and the world was still simple. I remember sitting on the cool cement floor of Gramps' garage, sorting screws into coffee tins while he tinkered with carburetors. His hands were always stained with grease, but they were steady. He'd let me hand him tools and explain what he was doing in that slow, deliberate voice of his that made me feel like I was part of something important. Nana, on the other hand, was warmth wrapped in an apron. Her cinnamon rolls were a neighborhood legend, but what I loved most was that she never treated me like a burden. She'd press a cup of cocoa into my hand after a rough day at school, ask questions, and actually listen. No distracted glances at a phone, no empty nods. Those were the years I felt seen, not useful, not convenient, just loved. My parents were there too, technically. They were barely out of their teens when I was born. Mom was 19, Dad was 20, both riding that wave of, we'll figure it out that young. Broke couples think we'll somehow carry them. They treated our life at Nana and Gramps like a pit stop, a free ride. Parties, sleep-ins, loud arguments, late-night apologies. I remember the smell of cheap perfume and sweat, the sound of the front door opening at 2 a.m., laughter that didn't include me. Gramps tried to teach Dad how to fix things, how to be a man, I guess. But Dad always had an excuse. That's what Chepoe is for, he'd grunt, eyes glued to his video game controller. I used to watch the tension ripple through Gramps' shoulders and wonder why he even bothered. Then came the announcement. We're moving out, Mom said one day, holding her stomach like it was a prize. She was pregnant again. I was 6. Naively, I felt excited. A baby, a new house. Maybe I'd have my own room, my own space. That illusion shattered fast. The place they found was a worn-down rental across town. Smaller, noisier, messier. The kind of place where you had to jiggle the toilet handle to get it to stop running, and where the walls were so thin you could hear a whisper in the next room. They acted like it was a palace. Look at us, all grown up, Mom would say, microwave dinner in one hand, the baby screaming in the other. They didn't name him Screamer, obviously, but that's what I called him. Kid had lungs like an air raid siren and no concept of volume control. He cried. Constantly. At first they asked for little things. Can you get me a diaper while I finish this episode? Just hold him for a sec while I do the dishes. But a sec turned into an hour, then 2, then whole afternoons. I was 7 years old and already learning that my worth in their eyes was tied to how much of their responsibility I could shoulder. Lesson: wounding doesn't always look like bruises. It creeps in softly, in little skipped moments of childhood, in the absence of care, in being asked to grow up before you're ready. What they did wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, persistent, strategic in a way that didn't feel like abuse until I looked back with adult eyes and realized what had happened. They started small, 10 minutes of babysitting, then an hour, then a day, until the line between helping and replacing blurred so completely I couldn't find it anymore. No one else seemed to notice. At school, I was just that responsible kid. Teachers praised my maturity. Family members at gatherings beamed at how well I wrangled toddlers while the adults drank wine and chatted in the other room. They're so lucky to have you, they'd say. Such a natural caregiver. You'll make a great dad one day. Funny how no one ever said, you deserve to be a kid. Part 2. Slowly drowning. They called it love. But I was just their backup plan. The thing about being used is that it doesn't always feel like use, at least not at first. It feels like duty, like family, like being needed, until you realize you've become indispensable, not because they love you, but because they depend on you in all the wrong ways. After Screamer came 4 more, one after another, like a production line. They never stopped, never asked if we could handle more, never even looked me in the eye and said, "Are you okay with this?" And the names I gave them, Tornado, Spitter, Velcro, Hurricane, they weren't jokes. They were survival labels. It helped me make sense of the madness, like naming storms so you can pretend you have some control over them. Velcro clung to me like I was oxygen. Spitter turned every meal into a biohazard. Tornado didn't walk. He rampaged. And Hurricane? She was the baby that finally broke me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started with weekends. My friends would text, "Arcade Saturday? Double feature at the movies?" And I'd stare at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, knowing what I had to write. Can't, watching the kids. They stopped texting after a while. I can't blame them. Who wants a friend who's always canceling? Who has to ask permission from absentee parents before hanging out? The loneliness hit hardest at night. Once the dishes were stacked, the diapers changed, the screaming subsided. That's when I'd sit on my bed, surrounded by baby bottles and toy cars, and wonder if this was it. My whole life. At 12 years old, I'd already missed birthday parties, school dances, sports tryouts, group projects. I'd become the default adult in the house. "Because you're so good with them," my mom would say. "You're mature for your age." Other kids would be grateful to be trusted this much. Grateful? Grateful that I'd been robbed of the very childhood she was supposed to protect? Seen a missed childhood in real time. I remember this one Saturday, burned into my brain like a scar. Jake, my best friend since 2nd grade, called to invite me to his birthday party. Pizza, video games, the whole thing. I was thrilled. I even picked out a hoodie the night before, but when I asked my mom, she barely looked up from her phone. "We've got dinner plans. You'll need to watch the kids." I begged. I cried, and finally she snapped. "Jesus, why are you being so dramatic? You act like we're asking you to climb a mountain." I called Jake and lied. Told him I was sick. He didn't believe me. That was the last birthday party I got invited to for years. Lesson: rage doesn't explode. Sometimes it boils. It builds in quiet moments, in missed milestones. In the silence where a thank you should have been. It becomes a roar that lives under your skin. By the time I turned 15, I was clocking more childcare hours than most licensed nannies. Except I wasn't paid. I wasn't thanked. I wasn't even acknowledged. What I was trapped. The final straw wasn't some massive blow-up. It was my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Chen, pulling me aside after I bombed yet another test. She asked gently, "Is everything okay at home?" And for a second, just one, I wanted to scream. To tell her everything. The diapers, the feedings, the crying, the sleep deprivation. The way my bedroom looked like a daycare center and smelled like warmed formula. But instead I shrugged. "Just tired." She smiled sadly, like she'd heard that one before. "Try to get some rest this weekend, okay?" Rest? There's no rest in a house where love is a transaction, and your worth is measured by how much labor you provide. Part 3, Stolen Futures. I was building their dreams. Mine were falling apart. There's a strange kind of hope that clings to you in survival mode. Fragile, quiet, desperate. The kind that whispers, "Maybe this will get better if I just hang on a little longer." I told myself that lie more times than I can count. When I started high school, I had plans, real ones. I wanted to study engineering, build something meaningful. Gramps used to talk to me about circuits and mechanics, and I'd picture myself in a lab coat, designing things that mattered. But every dream I had, every opportunity that came close, collided with reality like a freight train. Take the science fair. I'd been working on this mini wind turbine idea for weeks. It was supposed to be my big moment, Something I could put on a college app, something that felt mine. The night before the event, tornado broke the blades off the prototype. Hurricane threw up on the poster board. My parents were out. No one was there to help. I cried in the garage, surrounded by scraps and the sound of chaos from the living room. I didn't go to the fair. Didn't even tell my teacher why. Lesson: hope starves in a house of burdens. Every time you dare to want something for yourself, you're reminded that someone else needs you more. That your needs are optional. The guilt wasn't just external. It lived inside me, breathed with me, grew roots in every part of my self-worth. Because on the rare occasions I pushed back, said I couldn't help with homework, or begged to attend a club meeting, my parents knew exactly how to cut me down. You only think about yourself. Your siblings look up to you and you just abandon them? Maybe we trusted the wrong child. They didn't yell, they didn't hit. They shamed. And shame is louder than any scream. I remember this one night, sophomore year, when I finally had a plan to ask out this girl, Sarah. We'd been texting. She laughed at my stupid jokes. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could have something that was just mine. 2 hours before I was supposed to pick her up, my parents announced they were going to a wedding reception. Last-minute invite. Couldn't miss it. But I have plans, I said voice tight. Plans change, my dad muttered, scrolling on his phone. Family comes first. Family. That word they used like a weapon. I texted Sarah, told her I couldn't make it. She was nice about it. But things changed. She started talking to Derek, a kid whose biggest challenge was whether his dad would let him borrow the car. Meanwhile, I was bathing toddlers and unclogging toilets. Scene. The false narratives were forced to swallow. At a family barbecue, Aunt Karen watched me corral 5 kids under 10 like it was a magic trick. Your parents are so lucky, she said, beaming. Most teens wouldn't lift a finger. I forced a smile, nodded, pretended I didn't feel like I was choking on the praise. Uncle Mike slapped my dad on the back. You raised him right. My father grinned like he'd actually done something. That's when Paul, my cousin, stepped in. Quietly at first. He was older, watched me change a diaper during Christmas dinner, and pulled me aside after. This isn't normal, he said. I laughed. Because when something becomes your everyday, it stops feeling strange. But he didn't drop it. He started noticing, speaking up, calling it out during family gatherings. Where are their parents? He'd ask. They're not his kids. People squirmed, avoided eye contact, changed the subject. Because if they saw it, really saw it, they'd have to admit they were complicit too. Lesson: hope is a spark. Sometimes it comes from one person who sees you. Paul didn't fix my life, but he cracked open the illusion. He reminded me that my normal wasn't okay, and that mattered more than he probably realized. By the time junior year rolled around, I was unraveling. Fast. Sleepless nights. Missed assignments. My GPA dropped like a stone. When my guidance counselor suggested community college, I nodded like it was fine. Like I hadn't once dreamed of MIT. I was watching my future rot in real time, and I was too exhausted to save it. Part 4, breaking point. They gave me a crib. In my room. That was their version of love. They put the crib in my room. Not the living room, not theirs. Mine. It was after Hurricane was born. I was 16, already barely surviving on caffeine and resentment, when they made the decision. No conversation. No warning. Just a family meeting where they laid it out like a dinner menu. You're so good with her, Mom said. We really need our sleep for work, Dad added. So that was it. The crib went up where my desk used to be. The changing table replaced my bookshelf. Baby supplies lined every flat surface, swallowing what little space I had left to call my own. I started waking up every 2 hours to cries. real gut-wrenching sobs that cut through whatever scraps of rest I managed to get. I'd rock her, feed her, change her, walk slow laps around the hallway, whispering lullabies I barely remembered. Then I'd collapse on my bed, only to repeat the cycle again an hour later. And in the morning, school, homework, more kids to manage, more classes to fail. Scene: crib-side confession. One night around 1 a.m., I was sitting on the floor, legs numb, holding Hurricane as she screamed into my shoulder. My hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten in hours. My chemistry notes lay crumpled under the crib. I started crying, not soft, graceful tears. Ugly, broken sobs that racked my chest and made Hurricane pause just long enough to look confused before wailing again. That's when my dad came to the door, annoyed, like I was the one disrupting his night. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, arms crossed. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "I have a test tomorrow. I haven't slept in 3 days." He snorted. "Welcome to parenthood. Good practice for when you have your own kids." "She's not my kid." His eyes narrowed. "She's your sister. Family takes care of family." "Then why aren't you taking care of her?" I snapped. He blinked. Something about being called out, really called out, seemed to throw him. "I work all day. I need my sleep." I was trembling. "I go to school all day. I have homework. I have a job. When do I get to sleep?" "You'll figure it out. You always do." And that was the root of it, wasn't it? I was competent. That made me disposable. Lesson: heartbreak is realizing they'll never change. The people who should protect you are often the ones who exploit your reliability the most, and they'll never stop, unless you do. I failed the chemistry test. Hard. Mrs. Chen pulled me aside again, concerned. "You used to be one of my best students," she said. "What's going on?" I looked her in the eyes and nearly cracked. But what could I say? That I was the third parent in a household of 8? That I hadn't had a full night's sleep in months? That my future was slipping through my fingers because my parents couldn't be bothered to raise the kids they kept making? I said nothing, just nodded. "You should ask your parents for help," she suggested gently. I almost laughed. Scene: Mr. Johnson's wake-up call. Later that month, I was working on a group project with my friend Tyler. His dad, Mr. Johnson, overheard me talking about having to leave early to pick up my siblings. "Wait," he said, "your parents don't handle after-school pickups?" "They work late," I said, defaulting to the lie I'd rehearsed 100 times. He frowned. "So you're in charge of 6 kids every day?" I didn't answer. "How do you manage homework, sports, prep?" he asked, genuinely confused. "I don't." The silence in that room felt like someone had ripped the mask off. Tyler looked away, embarrassed, ashamed on my behalf. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was just alone. Lesson: sometimes strangers see what family refuses to. And sometimes the validation of that outsider is the first step toward escape. I started to take mental notes after that. Watch the way other families worked. How parents picked their kids up, asked about their day, packed their lunches, reminded them to sleep early. No one asked their kid to raise the others. At night, I lay in bed beside Hurricane's crib and dreamed of escape, of a room with a door that locked, of a life where I could go to college, fall in love, join a club, sleep. But I didn't know how. Not yet. Part 5, the exit plan. They didn't think I'd leave, so I did. The night they told me about baby number 8. The air in the room changed. My parents were beaming, smug in that delusional way only people in denial can be. "We have exciting news," Mom said, as if they'd just won the lottery. I didn't breathe. I knew. The way you know a storm is coming before the clouds gather. "We're having another baby." And then my dad, always the one to twist the knife with a smile, said, "Good thing you're 18 now. You can take on more responsibility without any legal issues." Legal issues. They had thought about the legal implications of what they were doing to me and decided it was fine now. Because I was legal. Because I wasn't their son anymore. I was their insurance policy, their free labor, their plan. Seen. Overheard truths. Later that night, I heard them through the wall. Whispering I wasn't supposed to hear. "Think he'll be okay with it?" Dad asked. Mom laughed. "Where is he going to go? He can't afford his own place." They weren't worried about me. They were worried about coverage, like managers scheduling shifts. And that's when it clicked. They weren't just bad parents. They were users. Emotional leeches wrapped in family titles. Lesson. Liberation starts with one ugly truth. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who hold you hostage with guilt, dependence, and manipulation. Seeing them clearly is painful, but it's how you begin to break free. That same night, I called Gramps. "Grandpa," I said, voice shaking, "they made another mistake. I need help." He didn't even pause. "Pack your stuff. We're on our way." Gramps and Nana showed up in under half an hour. They weren't just angry. They were furious. Not at me, at what had been done to me. They helped me grab my things, what little of me existed in that cluttered house of chaos, and loaded the car while my parents stood frozen at the door. "You can't just leave," Mom shouted, disbelief twisting her face. "Watch me," I said. "We're your parents," Dad barked. I stopped, turned. "No, you're the people who gave birth to me. There's a difference." Seen the threshold. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house, the screaming, the crying, the mess spilling out into the yard. It looked like a war zone, and I felt light. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Lesson. Liberation is ugly at first. It doesn't feel triumphant. It feels terrifying. You're not just leaving people, you're leaving the version of yourself they trapped you in. That night, I slept. 8 uninterrupted hours. No crying, no guilt, no crib. I woke up to pancakes and sunlight and Nana's soft humming in the kitchen, and I cried. Again. But not because I was breaking, because I was free. Part 6, Rebuilding Myself. They called the cost, I called it freedom. The fallout started immediately. Within hours of leaving, my phone blew up like a siren. Missed calls, angry voicemails, texts that swerved between threats and guilt trips so fast it was like watching someone unravel in real time. How dare you abandon your family like this? Get your ass home right now. Your siblings are crying. Velcro won't stop asking for you. We've always been there for you. Family sticks together. But the one that truly showed their hand came at 2 a.m. from my dad. Do you have any idea how much babysitters cost? There it was. The truth, bold and ugly. They hadn't lost a son. They'd lost a resource, a tool, a warm body they'd worn down for 18 years. Seen, the cops arrive. They called the police, twice claimed I'd been kidnapped, that I'd been coerced, that I was confused. The first officer who came to Gramps and Nana's looked at the facts, looked at me, 18 years old, a legal adult, a high school senior living in a safe home, and said, "Ma'am, unless you have proof of a crime, there's nothing we can do." The second time, they didn't even get out of the car. They were grasping at straws, because deep down they knew. They knew they'd built a house of cards on my back, and now it was all coming down. Lesson. Healing isn't just leaving. It's watching the truth stand without you. They collapsed the moment I stepped away, and for the first time, I realized they needed me more than I ever needed them. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Gramps and Nana had been watching. For years. They kept notes, dates, screenshots, voice messages, photos, everything. Every night I came home with dark circles under my eyes. Every joke I made about being the third parent. Every missed school function. Every time I showed up without a coat because I'd been too busy dressing 5 kids. They called CPS, and this time there were receipts. Seen the investigation. The caseworker was young, serious, and efficient. She spoke to each of my siblings separately. Children are terrible liars. When asked who handled the babies at night, my brother. Who helped with homework? My brother. Who made them breakfast, got them dressed, cleaned up their messes? My brother. Screamer. Wild, honest, unfiltered, said it best. He does everything. Mom and Dad just watch TV mostly. 3 weeks later, the report was finalized. Inappropriate delegation of parental responsibilities to a minor child, resulting in educational impact and emotional stress. That's legal speak for you treated your kid like a substitute parent, and now the law sees it. Lesson. Healing comes with consequences, and they're not yours. Their fantasy of being amazing parents shattered under actual scrutiny. And finally, it wasn't my burden to carry. They were slapped with mandatory parenting classes. Childcare education, 6 months of supervised visits from a caseworker, written acknowledgement of my rights, and the kicker, if they wanted date nights, they now had to hire a licensed sitter. Professional childcare for 5 kids? That's $150 a night, minimum. Suddenly, parenting wasn't so easy. Scene. My new life. I started sleeping, for real. My grades recovered. But I went from a 2.8 GPA to a 3.6 within 2 semesters. Got into the engineering program I dreamed of. I picked up a part-time job at Gramps' auto shop. Actual work, with a paycheck and respect. I started seeing friends again. Went to a movie, laughed without guilt, breathed without dread. It was like finding the pieces of myself I didn't know had gone missing. Lesson. Healing is work. But it's your work, finally. I wasn't holding up someone else's crumbling life anymore. I was building mine. The relationship with my parents is fractured, probably forever. But I'm okay with that. My siblings still call sometimes. Some of them ask why I left. I tell them the truth, in doses they can handle. Screamer once asked my mom why I had to take care of Hurricane at night. Families help each other, she said. He blinked. Then why didn't you help him with his homework? Out of the mouths of babes. Part 7, my story isn't over, but that chapter is closed. They took my childhood. I took back my future. There's a moment, a quiet one, when you realize you're not angry anymore. Not numb, not resentful, just done. That moment came to me while sitting on the porch swing at Gramps and Nana's place, watching a storm roll in across the hills. I just finished my first week at my new job. My college acceptance letter was pinned to the fridge inside. Nana was baking. Something cinnamon. Gramps was tuning the old Chevy in the garage. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence around me didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Lesson. Healing is peace, not perfection. You don't wake up one day with all the pain gone, but you do wake up one day not carrying other people's pain as if it's yours to hold. Sometimes I still get texts from my parents. Sometimes it's guilt. We miss you. The kids miss you. Sometimes it's manipulation. You know we were doing our best. But mostly it's silence now. I think they finally understand that I'm not coming back. Not to that role. Not to that house, because here's the truth. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I loved me. And for the first time in my life, that mattered more. Scene. One last family gathering. At a cousin's graduation, I saw them again. My mom, my dad. All 7 siblings corralled in a half circle of exhaustion and noise. They looked older, harsher. And behind them, Paul raised his soda in a silent salute. You made it. I didn't stay long, just enough to say hi to Screamer, now slowly maturing into something softer. As I turned to leave, I heard my mom say to another relative, "He just abandoned us." And instead of flinching, I smiled. Because now I know better. I didn't abandon anyone. I rescued myself. Lesson. Sometimes healing is walking away and not looking back. Forgiveness is a personal decision, but freedom? Freedom is a right, and I finally claimed mine. There are still scars. Some nights I wake up at 2 a.m. expecting to hear a baby cry. Sometimes I get nervous when my phone rings, expecting drama. But mostly, I'm good. Really good. My grades are strong, my mind is clear. I've got plans, big ones, that don't include babysitting or guilt or being anyone's fallback parent. I'm learning who I am when no one needs me, and I like that person. Final reflection. If this story sounds familiar, if you're reading this and thinking, God, that's me, I want you to know something. It's not your fault. You didn't ask for this. You didn't deserve this. And most importantly, you are allowed to leave. Even if they're your family, even if they say you owe them, even if they call it betrayal, you are allowed to protect yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people who told you your life didn't belong to you.